Hey folks, I am going to give a quick explanation of the curriculum map for you. First thing is first, I left the furthest to the left column just alone because that indicates where your learning goals are supposed to go. In the next column, I just went to my PER and I went to Table 2 and just copied and pasted each of my learning goals into the next column over. So the second column should have just each of your learning goals. My program has 4, and so there they are. The next column over just asks for the SLOs that are associated with each learning goal. That might be a different number, and so I had to go through and sort of delete and add rows here and there because the shading is a little wonky on all of this. I'll be honest with you, I fussed around with the way this looked a lot more than I did the actual compiling of the information. So with Learning Goal 1, for me, I've got SLOs 7, 8, 9, and 10. For Learning Goal 2, I've got 1 through 6. My program is a little weird because Goal 3 has SLOs 1 through 10. Those all do double duty, but with different learning goals. And then Learning Goal 4 has SLOs 11 through 15. Again, I got that information right from Table 3 in my PER. I have notated, hey, this one here is associated with Goal 2 and Goal 3. Number 7 is associated with Goal 1 and Goal 3. The other thing that I did, this gets down into the nitty gritty, is once I had said, all right, here's what's associated with what. As I went through, the next sort of columns over is where you actually enter in the course information. Now, the way that I've chosen to do this here at the end is to just do them numerically. So I have them in numerical order from 103 all the way up to well, I've got lessons here at the end. I sort of fudged it because 450 is actually, EDUC 450 is sort of the culminating course for my students. That's student teaching. And then I've got the lessons at the end, 100 through 400 level primary and secondary lessons, and then the small and large ensembles. Let me actually just give you a brief note on those things. I've made some slightly more manageable clumps based on the fact that there's almost no way for me to get the information from each and every single person who teaches a private lesson at our school. The likelihood of some professors actually just emailing me back about whether they do introductory, refining, or mastery of certain SLOs in their private lessons when they're an adjunct and they don't work here all the time might be slim to none. And so I did some combining and I did some intelligent decision making based on responses that I got from some full-time faculty. So what I've done is said, okay, 102, 202, 302, and 402 level primary lessons. So Josh Settlemeyer is a great example of a kid who majors in trombone. That's what he takes for 2 credit hours. And then he has his secondary lessons, which in some cases might be voice, and in some cases might be piano, or for some people it might be guitar, organ, etc. It's not the same for every kid what they have to take, and so I've just sort of clumped them into more workable chunks. And then I have large and small ensembles. The case that I'm making for large and small ensembles here is that in our large ensembles, we are constantly doing introductory, refining, and mastery of a number of different performance skills. And because we have people of different ability levels in pretty much every single ensemble that we teach, both small and large, that the case could be made for IRM at each level. And just based on the responses that I got from a few people, that's where I'd probably want to go with that. If there's argument to be made one way or the other, just let me know. I'm more than happy to entertain it. But I think that's probably the best catch-all that I can use without carrying this tedium on, into the right depths of this spreadsheet forever and ever. Amen. Because we have a lot of ensemble classes that not every student has to take in every program. And so there you have it. But if you have something that's a little bit more specific, for example, if you have something in your program that every single major has to take, then, by all means list it. But some of these are just electives, and we expect them to take a certain number of them, but we don't necessarily dictate which ones they have to be in every single case. And so I've just made that as a space-saving decision, and I don't think that we lose a lot of information from it. I also kept the I don't still have it up, but I did have the catalog up in digital form as I went through, adding each of these credit hours, because some of these I don't remember because I don't teach them. Like, I wasn't sure that counterpoint was 2 or that orchestration was 2. I thought they were 3. And so I used it as a reference, and occasionally I would come across an MUSC something. I was like, 450, 455, what are all these again? So I had to look up, and I was like, oh, that's piano pedagogy. Great. So some of these courses, maybe the ones that you don't teach or you don't see often listed but are part of your program, I kept it open for that. This is just the part that requires a little bit of patience. I went through and said, okay, all of these people need to be emailed, the people who teach this course and these ones and those ones and that one, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I would recommend is to make sure that you include the SLO that you're asking about, and answer any clarifying questions gently. One of the things that came up is that sometimes the way that an SLO will be assessed is different for different classes, and there may be some suggestion or follow-up questions that you might have for somebody about whether or not something actually is applicable or may be applicable and they hadn't thought about it. For example, my SLO number 10, students will assess teaching and program quality through observation and reflection, is an interesting one because it looks totally different in something like 347 than it does in something like 447. 347 is elementary methods, and the way that students do this in my class is sort of 2- and 3-fold. They watch themselves teach, and then they assess their own teaching and reflect upon it. But then they also go out and observe other teachers in the field who are currently elementary music educators. They also ask those teachers a series of interview questions, and then they reflect upon their teachers' answers to the questions. Was this something that they expected? Had they thought about that, before? What do they think about their teachers' answers to the questions? So that's the way they do that in the 347 course. But in the 447 course, and that's instrumental conducting, Mark does this a little bit differently in that teaching through conducting is a really important skill that our students need to learn. And the way that they do that, are they effective with conducting gestures? Did the ensemble do what the person wanted them to do? That's what they do when they watch their conducting videos and assess how well they did. Those guided reflecting type of questions, that is a way of assessing their teaching through reflection. And so that looks a little bit different than it does in my course. And so if you think that the case can be made for an SLO to be applicable to a course that maybe you have listed on your PER, but somebody says, no, this isn't in my course, you might give them gentle suggestion if you really, really feel like it might just look different and maybe it's a way that they hadn't considered before. Or maybe you're just wrong and they don't do it at all. And maybe you thought they did, but that's not what they do. And so just be gentle about clarifying questions and all of that. But yeah, that's the part of the process that just involves a little bit of patience because we're all really busy people, and sometimes you just have to wait for somebody to get around to it, because thinking about whether or not they address something in their course might be a longer process if it's something they just hadn't considered before. But that's where I got into, putting in I's and R's and A's. You'll notice that there's an A for everything, because if we have an objective, objectives are always assessed, and they should always be assessed, because if it's worth wanting to know if your students can do it, there has to be a way to know that they do it. So objectives and assessments are always connected, and if there is an objective, it should have an assessment. Those two things always go together. If you have an objective and it's not assessed, then it obviously is not that important because you haven't taken the time to find out whether a student knows it or not. So that's why they all have A's. I would recommend the same for everybody as you're going through, because if you have it as an objective, you should assess it. In any case, the purpose of this tool is not only to expose holes. I mean, I mentioned in the email about holes and what that means. I'll show you a hole. Here's a big gaping one. In the 11 through 15 in my program, you can see that there are not, these are some bullcrap mastery moments. These kids do not have a lot of experiences with these SLOs. Look at number 11. They'll discuss and implement research-based advocacy plans and philosophies concerning the importance of school music programs. They get one opportunity to do that. It's one thing. So for me, I look at that and say, how important is this really? Is it super important to their program? Is this an SLO that I need to consider eliminating from my program? Or do I need to create more opportunities for the students to do this thing? If it's really important and I considered including it in the program in the first place, then I need to create more opportunities for them to do it, and so on and so forth. So sometimes you can fix a hole, sometimes you can fill a hole. I'm going to be able to spread this out a little bit more, spread the love, as it were, through 449. When that course comes on the books, I'll be able to say, hey, there's more opportunity to do some of these things that I just don't have time to do in between 347 and 348. So there are a few more refining experiences or opportunities for them to do it before they need to master it in student teaching. So there's that. There's a hole. But the other great thing about doing a curriculum map, and I realize that my assessment nerd is showing, please pardon me, is that it is a useful tool both vertically and horizontally. And what I mean by that is looking at, say, elementary methods, just through SLOs 7 through 10, not across the whole spectrum, because it's pretty much the same. As you can see, it addresses 7 through 10. This is the first class that students take in my program that is a music education specific class. This is about methods and how to teach music. So it ought to be introductory in a lot of cases. This is the first time that I really have them do a music-specific lesson plan. It's when we talk about sequencing. It's when we talk about, the appropriate ways to teach elementary age children. It ought to be introductory. And so I can look at it and say, all right, is this appropriate? I am not in love with how many R's I have to have, but part of the reason that it is R is because they have so many opportunities to teach in that class. The last semester I taught it, students taught each other 9 times, and that's not counting the number of times that they taught out in schools. So that's a lot. So you hope that by the time that it's over that they are starting to refine some of those introductory skills. I wish I had them more often to talk about elementary music, but I don't. But I look at this and I say, okay, great. Introductory is part of this. Refining near the end, I'm fine. As long as I'm not asking them to master things at this level, because it's literally the first course that they take that's music education specific. It would be inappropriate for me to expect mastery level at this case. So you can look at that vertically with your courses and say, is this in line? Does it make sense for what is there to be there? If there's something introductory, does it make sense that it would be introductory at this level? For example, I have some things in 348 that are just introductory only. I've got mock interviews for students. It's the first time that I have them interview with somebody. I kind of wish I would do that in 347. I probably need to work on that, but honestly, I think that 347, if I had them interview in that class, it would scare the snot out of them. So in this case, I could justify having an introductory thing in the next course in their program. But then looking at EDU C450, that's student teaching. Well, it ought to be mastery. They're about to go get teaching licenses. And so if I have introductory things in student teaching, I really need to examine what I'm doing in the class, or where else I can possibly address that in the program, because introductory level things just don't belong here. And then talking about horizontally, looking at the progression of how a student deals with an SLO across their program is a great thing to do, because it allows you to see whether or not they're getting a fair number, let me rephrase that, a good number of introductory, refining, and mastery experiences with a specific SLO. So the great thing about 7, my students do that in almost every education-specific course that they take. So they have a lot of opportunities to get introduced to this SLO and to show introductory mastery of it. And then they have some refining experiences. They have a good deal of them. And then they have enough mastery experiences. So I feel like this really works. But then again, I have a hole in some places down here in my 11 through 15s. These are important to music education, but I don't have a lot of opportunities for the students to work on these things. Not very many at all, and it's just really no good. I have no refining opportunities here. I have no mastery level opportunities here. I just have an introductory experience here. I have no refining, so I've got some holes, and it allows me to address that. And that's really the purpose of this. This is for us. Now, in the case of my program, I have a great opportunity to add a course, and I really appreciate everybody's support with doing that. We're going to have a portfolio that's going to require these kids to have a lot more experience than we can currently afford them with the courses that they have to take. I've got to fix some of that stuff. And I can fix my hole, but not everybody has an ability to fill the hole with another class. Sometimes it means shifting things around and saying, all right, well, I'm not really addressing that in this course, but I can, and so maybe I should. Either by introducing it, refining it, or mastering it. It means that sometimes we have to look at where we're putting our eggs and into what baskets, and sometimes shifting them around to either weight it a little bit more equally or disperse it a little bit better over the progression of courses that a student takes. And so that's really the purpose of this exercise. And it is nice to be able to see it. If you're a visual person, this is really helpful. But again, organize these in a way that makes sense for you. I've done mine just by number and then sort of glommed the performance experiences on the end, because that made the most sense for me. But because this is a document for you to look at, do it in a way that makes sense for you. And as always, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I'm going to be in Nashville over the Memorial Day weekend, but I will have internet access and I will be able to check my email. And I hope you all have a good one. Happy mapping.